Today's show, we're joined by Jane Addams, who is running for Congress in the state of Nevada. Let's get to it. Jane, welcome to the Big Three Meet podcast powered by G Media. How are you doing today?
Good. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful. So one of the reasons why we wanted to bring you on the show today is because we are of the belief that talking about cryptocurrencies, blockchain technology, Bitcoin needs to be talked about from that advocacy political stance. And we definitely want to hear your stance. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you decide to jump into a crazy race, because anyone running for Congress has got to, as a former political wonk myself, it is, and campaign manager for congressional and state campaigns, it is not an easy task to do what you're doing. So tell us why you got into it.
I've been working in politics for about 6 years. I was always interested in getting people more involved in the political process. I felt like being out in the field was the best way to do that, learning to talk to voters, understanding what makes them tick, what makes them want to vote. A lot of people don't vote. And I wanted to make sure young people were getting out, our voices were being heard. I feel like our Congress has not had our best intention in mind when they pass legislation. When I say us, I mean younger generations. A lot of their decisions are based on profit for themselves. Our budget is in a massive deficit, and all the people elected to Congress have millions of dollars. So they clearly know how to balance a budget and even build a surplus, but somehow they're just not really concerned with doing that with taxpayers' money. So that was always something I wanted to change. And I felt like if I just rallied up enough people to vote, it would happen. Unfortunately, Congress has so much power that people aren't actually allowed to have a voice. We're not allowed to participate in the lawmaking process on the federal level. That moved me, got me a little bit upset. So I started working on campaigns more closely with campaigns and congresspeople elections. And it was really exciting. I enjoyed it a lot. We got a few people elected. And I felt like that's where the impact would be made, is directly through elected officials on a local level. And so I started consulting in my spare time. I started consulting candidates. I started encouraging people to start running. I said, don't worry, it's not that difficult. I'll help you. I give you some advice. And people would just start calling me all the time and said, you know what, let me just start charging people for this. And there was one campaign I was managing a couple years ago, last election cycle. And I was just consulting, and they started referring to me as their campaign manager. I thought, wow, this is kind of a big title. I don't want to take on that responsibility. But the candidate that I was working for passed away. And this election cycle, his niece wanted to run and asked me to manage her campaign. And so we started down that route. I had planned out the entire campaign. And last minute, she decided instead of running for Congress, to run for school board. And she convinced me to run for Congress. And yeah, and I'm an ordinary person. I don't like being in a spotlight. I haven't been on social media in almost 5 years. So when I decided to run, I wasn't really ready for all the attention or jumping back into live personality. It takes a lot of effort, actually, a lot of courage to do that. But as far as Bitcoin and cryptocurrency goes, something I was introduced to several years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Someone I met through a dating app. I was convinced that Bitcoin was the next big thing and was trying to explain to me. And I just thought, what is this, magical internet money? This guy is probably completely insane. I don't want to see him again. He's crazy. But he did gift me with some Bitcoin. He's like, oh, you'll see. So I thought, okay, great, sure. Have a great life, right? And
you can never be too sure. Number one, of anyone you meet on a dating app. I met my significant other on a dating app, so I'm not that. But when you do meet people who are first getting into cryptocurrencies, digital currencies, and Bitcoin, sometimes they're a bit much, when they're talking about it. So that scared you off, and I'm glad it didn't scare you off from learning about it. Now, when we're learning about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin specifically, you sit in a very unique position right now. You're running for Congress in a state that is the #1 state in gold. Like, gold is a big thing in Nevada. So talk to me about how you are talking to your constituents about how Bitcoin is really the wave of the future, and why Nevada doesn't need to fear Bitcoin. It needs to embrace it, especially when it comes to the casino and gaming industry.
Absolutely. So Nevada is a state rich in mineral resources. We're a top state in gold production, silver. We have lithium, silicon. I've also been pitching us to start making chips so we could fill in that chip shortage, processor chips. So one of the things we have problems with here in Nevada is our electric grid. We have a lot of power outages, which is part of why I'm not able to be part of the Lightning Network node hosts, and which is unfortunate. But we have a lot of power outages. Our grid is very weak. And so last legislative cycle, the last meeting of the legislature, they passed a couple bills that were meaning to expand our grid, strengthen our grid. And they started offering tax abatement for groups that would start building energy generating facilities and energy storage facilities. So we're trying to build up our reserves. We don't have oil in Nevada. We don't have coal in Nevada. We have a little bit of natural gas, but most of our energy is imported. And so renewables are where it's at. We don't really have a choice. I get a lot of conflicting voices on this, that I'm anti-oil or anti-fossil fuels. It's not about that. This is what the resources we have. We have to make the most of it.
So I think that's a good point. I think that's a good point to lean into a little bit, is that it's not about being anti anything. It's about being pro your constituency, right? So you're saying, hey, listen, if we had oil, I'd be for oil. But you know what? People here in Nevada we don't have oil. So there's no economy for that. But there's economy for these green energy sources, because guess what? You guys have plenty of sunlight, plenty of sunlight and wind.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So we have sandstorms all the time. You see like trees laying in the roads. So yeah, these are our resources. We have to take advantage of them. I think this last few months has shown us how important energy independence is. And I believe that energy independence is truly freedom. If you can make decisions for yourself, if you don't have to depend on anyone else, nobody can really use that leverage to force you into decisions you don't necessarily want to make because they're not advantageous to the state.
Mm-hmm.
So I just became really focused on energy independence, on wealth generation, for the state. And I realized that, yeah, we have so much sun, so much wind, just like you said. And so that's what we need to do. We need to get into solar, wind, geothermal. I'm also a big supporter of nuclear. We have a nuclear depository that's been waiting to get built. A lot of environmentalists are opposed to it, but we have a lot of nuclear waste all over the country just sitting in bins. And a lot of people don't know, but nuclear waste is recyclable.
Yes.
And I'd like to get it all over there. And it's net zero emission.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that I think is often missed. And this is why I tend to stay away from the letters behind people's names because they mean very little to me, to be honest. You can be a D, an R, an L, an XYZ, QPRS. Like the whole alphabet can go out the window because what this really comes down to is not energy consumption. It's about being pro-economy. It's about being for the economy that you have. And each state falls within somewhere of a different category. It's hey, some states have tons of wind. Some people have mountainous areas. Some people have water. You guys don't have a lot of rivers and streams and lakes. So you're not going to be, hey, we're not really into hydro, but we do have a lot of wind in the sun. So we can use that to mine. But the issue really comes down to, and I'm a constitutionalist, by the way, I'm a constitutionalist and I read the Constitution vigorously, is that within the Constitution, Bitcoin is not mentioned, but gold and silver are. And the only people who can change the Constitution is through 2/3 of ratifications through the states or through Congress. So for you, getting to Congress would mean what for Bitcoin and what for being able to allow certain CBDCs or something along those lines. And for those who are watching who don't know what a CBDC is, CBDC stands for is a central bank digital currency. So again, my question to you, Jane, is what would getting to Congress mean for CBDCs and or Bitcoin as a larger umbrella?
I love that question. So I'll start with CBDCs. So I like to refer to CBDCs as Fedcoin. I believe it, right? Essentially what they'd be doing is getting us to use wallets, like digital wallets. This is just a guess. But it just seems like a practical guess, but they would have us use special government wallets. So that, just to start with that, once you start downloading government apps into your phone, of course, there's going to be spyware. Amazon, Facebook, all those companies, they call it data collection software, but that's spyware. That's literally what spyware is. And I personally am not comfortable with the Federal Reserve having control over my phone, having control over my money. So they would essentially be able to decide who can and can have money. Let's say someone doesn't pay their taxes or forgets or doesn't know how. They could just go into your account and, take that money, remove it from your balance without warning you, because maybe it was in the fine print when you downloaded the app. Most people don't read fine print.
Most do not. But at the same time, they can do that now. I mean, most people get their checks. I mean, if you've ever, there's been multiple pieces of legislation passed over the last 20 years that require any deadbeat parent, and I said deadbeat parent because it's not just the fathers, it's everybody. If a deadbeat parent doesn't pay their child support, they can deduct money from them, their wages, or they can deduct money straight out of your check from work. So would this be different than that?
It would be different because with parental law, like parental child support issues, you have to go to court. The partner generally is aware, has a chance to argue it, get a lawyer, things like that. But with Bitcoin, it would just be, the fine print, you agree, and that's it. They'd be able to do whatever they want. I think that could be stressful for a lot of people, especially low-income families with more than 2 kids. Nowadays, with inflation, with stagnant wages, it's becoming really difficult for families to provide their kids with the resources that they need, especially if you compare it to about 50 years ago. People are really struggling. Millennials aren't having as many kids. Young people aren't buying as many homes. Most Americans don't have a lot of savings, living paycheck to paycheck. So that's why mainly it's a concern for me, because it puts Americans at risk of falling deeper into debt, which is a trap. I think Bitcoin is the solution to that, or Bitcoin fixes that. So basically it puts money in the hands of individuals. They can decide for themselves how they spend their money. And it's not that they can avoid paying their taxes. I mean, it's a public ledger. So all transactions are visible on the blockchain. It's absolute transparency. I've had people call it radical transparency. So it's fair. It's you can't evade it. But people at the same time have more power over their finances. They're able to make transactions for free, and they don't have to go through a third party, pay a ton of fees, put money in a bank, which is another issue. There's been talks of looking at taxpayers' accounts, at American citizens' bank accounts. I think it was anything over $600.
Yeah, that was that proposal that came through the I think the Build Back Better plan, which I spoke to people in the administration, and I told them that I was adamantly against that as well, because effectively is that you come up with arbitrary numbers. And that's, I think, is something that is also concerning, is like, it's an arbitrary number. You just randomly picked or selected a financial amount. Like, oh, if you go over this threshold, but it's like, well, you know what? I'd like to say this to my federal government all the time. I'd rather have you treat me the same way you treat the banks right now. Like, think about this. If you and I were to sell a stock and we put that money into another stock, as long as we didn't pull that capital out, we don't get to say that was realized gains. But they're trying to tax us on unrealized gains. And it's like, well, wait a second. I haven't done anything with my Bitcoin. As Michael Saylor told me a couple weeks ago, don't sell your Bitcoin, but that's not financial advice. So tell me, Jane, what do we get to do when we tell people, well, I don't want to be treated worse than the banks. I wanted to be treated better than the banks, but now you're trying to treat me like I'm an idiot. Like, what should we say to our government when they do that?
I definitely think we should oppose it. We need to speak out. A lot of people are concerned now with just putting food on the table, keeping a roof over their heads. And that also distracts people from paying attention to policy. A lot of people don't watch what's going on the Hill, on Capitol Hill with lawmakers. I know a lot of people in politics that don't watch C-SPAN at all. I'm kind of a C-SPAN dork. And that helps a lot.
David Gokhshtein would not be. David and I were just talking about this. We said that C-SPAN has way too many channels.
Yeah, you could like channel surf and see which one is more exciting.
It's actually, I tell a lot of my friends when I got into politics many years ago, I told them I got in because it was cheaper than watching the Real Housewives of Atlanta. It was cheaper than my cable bill. I was like, I got into politics. Yeah. It was cheaper, and the drama is just as intense, if not more intense.
Oh wow. Oh yeah. I don't know if these people have publicists or handler, I don't know, but they come up with really good storylines. You're like, wow, that's a really bold move. Seriously. And I always wonder, how do they go out in public without getting harassed, or, it looks scary, actually. I don't think anyone, like an average American, would ever consider being a part of that. Nobody would want to be a part of that unless they really wanted to get something important done, or just become a multimillionaire with friends in high places, which is what they do right now. Congress is very close with the banks. I'd say they're even in bed with the banks, so to say. Banks have a lot of privileges that people don't. And also people on politicians, the Fed always talk about the trickle down economy. And it's actually what I believe is a trickle up economy. So when people are depositing money into the banks are allowed to create debt for other people to utilize. I think they actually removed the limit for how much debt they can imagine up. So basically, banks also tend to only lend money to people that can afford to have money, to other rich people. So they're able to utilize that debt, leverage that debt to buy more assets, to gamble on the stock market. They have insider trading knowledge. So it's just, they're constantly increasing their wealth. Meanwhile, the people that are putting their money into banks are not increasing their bag with interest, because the interest rates are so low. And with inflation, they're actually losing money.
Yeah.
So I always try to tell people, go ahead.
No. I was going to let you finish. My apologies.
I always try to tell people, instead of keeping your money in banks, find some investments. Even people that aren't financially savvy, it's good to find something to put your money in. I often recommend Bitcoin, sometimes even other coins, but it takes some research to prepare for something where I've seen a lot of people lose money and they just get depressed. And I also don't recommend that.
Well, I've lost a lot. I tell people there's two ways to learn, right? You either lose a lot or you learn a lot. Those are two ways. You lose a lot of money, or you lose a lot of friends, or you lose a lot of social capital, or you learn a lot. Like, you take your time, you learn about the investment, you learn about community that's building these investments, you learn about the financial literacy part, you find about the economics of it and the education. But that's something that most of us never get. We don't get educated on cryptocurrencies. Matter of fact, most of us never get educated on our financial institutions as they sit right now. And one of the plans that you discuss in your policy plans is that you want financial literacy education to be taught from K through 12. Tell me about why it's important that we educate young people, because I'll say this now. I had to tell people, I didn't know what a dividend was until I was in my 20s. I didn't understand how debt worked until I was in my 20s. And I think that when you're in your 20s, you should be building wealth towards your future, not figuring it out and going, oh my God, I can't get a bank account because I decided to rage at some big party institution. I mean, let's just say I went to UNLV or something, and I decided to rage and spend all my money. Now what? I got bad credit. I can't get a bank account. What do I do?
Yeah, exactly. I think the only difference between rich people and poor people is financial education. And we absolutely need to teach that in schools. I think young people don't understand how big of a deal that is. Just like, sure, I'll pay that back. They're not factoring in interest. They're just so excited to join their friends in school. They have pressure from family to go to college. And that's another thing. I don't think college is for everyone. I don't think we should put so much emphasis on college. I think people have different skills. A lot of people work with their hands that really could make a lot of money doing everyday things for people. But K to 12 should definitely teach education. They used to have home economics class. They would teach people how to cook a meal, how to balance a checkbook. Nowadays, I've seen people don't even know where to find a postage stamp. I've had people ask me, how do I fill out a check? Can you fill it out for me? How do I fill out a letter? Where does to and from go? And I'm just looking like, wow, it's getting really bad. They're not teaching anything in school. They don't teach us laws. They don't teach us about taxes. They teach us absolutely nothing. We're so dependent on other people just to manage our finances. And especially people in low income communities, their schools aren't so great. Their general education is not so great. And that's just sad. I think if we started young, would be great. I actually was not taught much about finances. I was just taught to save. Don't be wasteful.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be frivolous with your money. And yeah, that's good. That's a good start, right? Like you said, you don't want to be spending a ton of money on frivolous things. And also, like you said, you either learn or you lose, right? And I got into trading on Cash App, actually. I noticed they had like a stock feature for fractional shares, and I got into that. I was actually really good, surprisingly enough. And I realized, like, oh, I should be doing this. If my parents or schools had taught me this early on, wow, I would have been a billionaire by now. Really, and that's how I moved into cryptocurrency and trading in that. And that's another good point you made. Capital gains, if you're buying and selling, we shouldn't be paying capital gains on that. If we're not using it to spend, then, I think the government really should get out of our financial business. They clearly don't know how to spend our money. I think people should keep money in their communities. We know best what our communities need. We shouldn't be sending all our money to rich politicians and cross your fingers. Hopefully they'll send some back to us, which they usually don't.
Well, and there are states that would suffer. I mean, there are some states that do suffer if we don't do that. I mean, California is the 4th or 5th largest economy in the world. And if California just kept all its money, then states like Mississippi would literally go bankrupt within a few years because they don't have a natural infrastructure that they built. But this does lead to another, and that leads back to what you were saying before, is that, well, if Nevada leaned into its natural resources and I know I just used Mississippi, but if Nevada uses its natural resources, builds an infrastructure using green energy, not because they don't like oil, but because it's what they have, then they will be successful. And then communities will grow and flourish because guess what? Money is staying in the state and they're helping their own people. Yeah. And listen, I believe in the old the proverb, rising ships lift all tides. And so with that, we are almost out of time. Jane, thank you for joining us. I will give you your closing remarks and anything you want to say to your community, voters, or people just in general, and let them know where they can find you at.
All right. So I recommend everyone get involved in Bitcoin. We can really move forward with energy independence all over the nation. Our states can grow enough money to take care of themselves, ourselves. We have a lot of money in Nevada already to begin with the casinos, and we could really build on that. Bitcoin is the future. It's finance education and independence. We can really put the future into our own hands. We have the privilege of public ledgers, so we can see what the government is spending money on, not have a lot of dark money, which is happening right now. I encourage everyone to register to vote, update your voter registration, make sure you're ready to vote, check out who your congressperson is, just do research for half an hour, and look at the candidates that are running in your district. try to support Bitcoin candidates. We really need to make this push to turn Bitcoin into legal tender, make sure we have the ability to spend it all over the nation. Whoever wants to hold, great. I think the movement is also about having power over our spending, not just over our savings. And make sure you get out there and vote. Many states have different primary dates, so make sure you're getting out there.
And Jane, where can they go to if they want to engage with you on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook? Where would they go?
I'm most active on Twitter. I'll say to first visit my website as my platform on there. My use janeadams.us, JANEADAMS.us. And if you want to contact me directly, I'll respond to your direct messages on my Twitter. And my handle is I love Jane Adams.
Well, thank you, Jane, for joining us here on Gokhshtein Media. And for everyone sitting at home, remember, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Independent, you're a human first, so treat each other with kindness. My name is Akil Patterson, host of The Big 3 and Me, powered by G Media. Have a great day and an even better tomorrow.